The world is getting more and more crowded as the world's population grows. The places showcased in today's video, however, are crowded beyond imagination. Here are the top 15 most crowded places on Earth. Number 15. Mong Kok District, Hong Kong. The Mong Kok District is one of the main shopping areas in downtown Kowloon, Hong Kong, and is made up of a wide range of streets where traditional and modern designs clash. If you've seen a movie where part of it is in Hong Kong, the likeliness is that it was set in Mong Kok, where the multi-story buildings tend to have stores and restaurants on street level, with commercial and residential units higher up. What's amazing about the district, though, is that it's been declared to have the densest population of anywhere in the world, with the equivalent of 340,000 people per square mile. With so many residents and tourists, Mong Kok often finds itself at the center of political protests that take place in Hong Kong, and was a particular focus in the 2014 Hong Kong protests and the 2016 civil unrest. Authorities have found it very difficult to control the large number of people that can accumulate here, and there's been talk of trying to move a significant proportion elsewhere so it becomes more manageable. Number 14. The Dead Sea of China. When temperatures rise, there's only one thing we all want to do. If possible, instead of going to work, we all go straight to a local swimming pool or beach to cool down in the water. But unfortunately, we're often not the only ones with the same idea. Luckily, in most places around the world, there's a variety of choice about where to go and restrictions of how many people can be in the water at any one time. But in China, things can get a little out of hand. During the summer in the Daying County in the Sichuan province, locals and tourists flock to the local water park, which is set over 7 acres. More than 1 million people visit each summer and has a theoretical capacity of 10,000 people. But whenever images of the so-called Dead Sea Pool are released, you can hardly see the water for the densely packed bodies. One of the reasons it's so popular is because it's a saltwater pool and has a salinity close to the levels of the actual Dead Sea, which means guests can float on the surface without much effort at all. Since that's the case, you may be left wondering why so many of them take inflatables into the water with them, and the answer to that is simple. It's proven to be one of the most effective ways to carve out a little extra space for yourself within the pool. Number 13. Shibuya Crossing, Japan. Shibuya Crossing in the Shibuya ward of Tokyo, Japan is one of the most famous road crossings on Earth, thanks to its regular inclusion in movies and pop culture. And it may not come as the greatest surprise to learn that it's also the busiest crossing in the world. Located in front of one of the exits of Shibuya Station, there are 3 huge television screens that overlook the crossing, and a large Starbucks that's also believed to be one of the most crowded in the world. It's what's known as a scramble crossing, where all the vehicular traffic is stopped at the same time to allow people to cross the street in any direction, including diagonally. While these types of crossing were first developed in the US and Canada, they are now far more common elsewhere in the world, and Japan alone has more than 300 like it. Shibuya's crossing, though, is a cut above the rest, and in each scramble as many as 3,000 people can cross the intersection at once. Number 12. Times Square. Times Square is at the heart of New York at the junction of Broadway and 7th Avenue. Once known as Longacre Square, it was renamed in 1904 when the New York Times moved its head offices there, and ever since has been a focal point of the city. It's the entertainment hub, a tourist destination, and a must-see site. It's one of the most popular tourist hotspots in the world, with an estimated 50 million visitors each year, and an estimated 460,000 people walk through the square on its busiest days. Amazingly, this means that Times Square is visited by more people each year than all of the worldwide Disney amusement parks combined. And 22 cents for every dollar spent by visitors to New York is spent within the square, accounting for $4.8 billion annually on food, merchandise, entertainment, and hospitality. While this is busy enough, the square really comes into its own as the center of the New Year's Eve celebration for the nation. It's in Times Square that the world-famous ball drop occurs, as usually up to 1 million people will crowd into the square to be part of it. On New Year's Eve 1999, however, it's thought that at least twice that number tried to cram into the streets, and this overcrowding has its consequences for residents and services in the city. It was estimated in 2014 that by 8 in the morning on New Year's Day, the New York City Department of Sanitation had removed more than 50 tons of trash from the square, and weren't even close to being finished. Number 11. St. Peter's Square, Vatican City. Known in Italian as the Piazza San Pedro, St. Peter's Square in the Vatican City, Rome, is one of the most recognizable squares in the world, thanks to the fact that it's located in front of St. Peter's Basilica, and is where crowds gather to hear the Pope speak from the balcony. The famed obelisk at the center was the first element to be installed in 1586 after being carried there from Egypt, and it would be a further 100 years before the square itself was designed and built around it. Every pope since it was completed in 1667 has spoken to a congregation in the square, and it's difficult to comprehend just how much history this site has been part of. People flock from far and wide, especially for special occasions, and it's Christmas and Easter in particular that draw the greatest crowds. At just over 1,000 feet long and 790 feet wide, it has a theoretical maximum capacity of 300,000 people, but it's not uncommon for far more to cram into the space. For those who do make it in, a truly spiritual experience awaits. The square is surrounded by 284 columns, 88 pilasters, 140 statues of saints that were created in 1670, and has 2 fountains at the center of the square, which were both originally built in the 17th century. Number 10. The Grand Bazaar, Istanbul. When you visit your local shopping mall, you might think you get surrounded by huge crowds, especially during the busy times of year, but that's nothing compared to how packed one of the world's oldest covered markets gets on a day-to-day basis. The Grand Bazaar in Istanbul, Turkey, is made up of 61 streets and more than 4,000 stores, and is often said to be the most visited tourist attraction on the planet, with more than 91 million people passing through each year. Located within the walled city of Istanbul, it's one of the first shopping malls to ever open, with stores first welcoming visitors in the winter of the year 1455. The idea was to stimulate economic growth in the city, and since then it's gone from strength to strength. It continued to grow over the following centuries, and had taken on its current design by the early 1600s. It's said that you can buy virtually anything the heart desires within the market, and today is responsible for employing around 26,000 people to help cater the 400,000 daily visitors. As such an ancient site, there are ongoing concerns about the safety of having so many people in a sprawling structure that's continually being redeveloped and lacks the safety standards you'd expect. So in recent years, a renovation program has been in place that's still installing heating and lighting systems, as well as improving the infrastructure to ensure that it's fit for the modern world. Number 9. The Forbidden City, China. Built between 1406 and 1420, the Forbidden City in central Beijing, China, was the home of Chinese emperors and the government for more than 500 years. It covers an area of more than 180 acres and is made up of 980 individual buildings. And since 1925 has been a museum where countless artifacts from the Ming and Qing dynasties are on display. It's one of the best preserved examples of ancient Chinese architecture and was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1987. With so much to see and explore around the Central Palace Museum, it's now one of the most popular tourist destinations in the whole of China, and welcomes on average around 19 million visitors each year, which equates to more than 50,000 people each day. Normally, on a site this large, this wouldn't feel too overcrowded, but because there are focal points of interests and narrow walkways, the Forbidden City can soon feel like it's full beyond capacity, and you often see people jostling for the best vantage points. A trip to Beijing isn't complete without visiting the Forbidden City, because there's possibly no better place on the planet that you can go to see such a large collection of ancient objects. There are more than 50,000 paintings, 340,000 pieces of ceramic and porcelain, 10,000 pieces of bronze, and 30,000 pieces of jade, which makes it by far the largest museum in the world. We are constantly adding more people to the Top 5's production team to bring you all the best content. Be sure to subscribe with notifications on and hit the like button. Number 8. The Danube Island Festival. Music fans across the globe regularly gather at large-scale events to watch their favorite artists perform. But where do you think the biggest music festival is held each year? Well, you may guess Summerfest in Wisconsin, Glastonbury in England, or Rock in Rio in Brazil. The honor goes to the Danube Island Festival, which in Austria is known as the Donauinselfest. Established in 1984 and taking place on an island in the Danube River in the country's capital city, Vienna, the event has attracted the who's who of influential world music acts over the years. There's usually 11 different open-air stages and 16 enclosed tents on the almost 3-mile-long island, and over the 3 days that it takes place, it regularly registers more than 3 million visitors. One of the main reasons why so many people go to this particular festival is because there's no actual entry fee. To keep control of the crowd number, security checkpoints are set up to regulate their movement, and surprisingly, it's regarded as one of the most secure events that take place in Europe. There's a real international feel, with food stalls representing any cuisine you can think of. And while the organizers don't make any profit from ticket sales, It's believed to bring in at least €40 million to boost businesses in the city because of the increased tourism. Number 7. Bangladesh Railway. Hundreds of millions of people around the world rely on public transport for their daily commute to work. You often hear complaints of passengers being unable to find seats on trains and being forced to stand up in the carriages for the majority of their journeys in what they would describe as cramped conditions, and images of Japanese train companies using station attendants to help push more people into the cars each morning often get worldwide attention for how busy the transport network is. But there are plenty of places in the world where this problem would be seen as a luxury. Bangladesh in Southeast Asia is the 8th most populated country in the world, with 162 million people. But because it's just the 92nd largest country, it has one of the highest population densities you'll see anywhere on Earth. This has consequences for everything from housing to healthcare, education, and food supplies. But one of the most visually surprising is their train network. There's rarely any room inside the carriages, so instead of waiting for the next train, passengers instead climb onto the roof or even hold onto the sides. Problems become even more severe following religious ceremonies, such as the Biswa Ijtema, which sees millions of people trying to get home from Dhaka, as the trains can often get so crowded with people on the outsides that it's almost impossible for the drivers to see through their windows. With a normal capacity of up to 5,000 people inside, each train can end up carrying in excess of 30,000 people, each of whom is taking their life into their own hands as the train accelerates at up to 50 miles per hour. It's not uncommon to see people falling off onto the ground alongside the track, but amazingly, reports of fatalities are extremely rare. Number 6. Santa Cruz del Islote. Off the coast of Colombia in the Caribbean Sea is an archipelago of islands called San Bernardo. Because of its ideal location, both because of the weather and because of the fish stocks, it's a highly sought-after place for fishermen and other workers to live, particularly the island of Santa Cruz del Islote. What's especially surprising about this island is that it's artificial and is made up of raised land and coral, where every square inch is used to its full potential. In fact, when you approach it, it's hardly clear whether it's an island or a floating community. And with 115 homes on an area no bigger than 2 soccer fields, it's one of the most densely populated islands in the world. Residents all know each other. There's no need for police because there's no crime. And despite being a popular tourist attraction, there's not a single hotel, with visitors instead staying on a nearby island and taking day tours to Santa Cruz del Islote itself. Despite its cramped nature, the 1,200 residents are incredibly proud of the island. And even if they were given a choice to move somewhere more spacious, most wouldn't. There's a real community feel, which seems inevitable you're living so close to one another. And while it may seem chaotic to outsiders, it's survived remarkably well like this for more than 150 years. Number 5. The 2016 World Series Parade. Sports fans are some of the most passionate people on Earth. They'll travel to faraway countries and states just to get chances to see their team play in important matches, and they are the first to celebrate to the next level when they succeed. Worldwide, soccer fans are usually the most dedicated supporters and will go to extremes to celebrate or berate their team's players based on their performance. But the record for the biggest party in the wake of a victory in recent times goes to the Chicago Cubs. In 2016, they made the World Series playoffs against the Cleveland Indians and beat their opponents 4-3. It was the first time the Cubs had won the World Series since 1908, so understandably, a huge celebration was in order. The fans began to congregate outside of Wrigley Field and throughout the Wrigleyville neighborhood. And on the 4th of November that year, a parade was held between Wrigley Field, which went downtown, for a rally at Grant Park. Amazingly, an estimated 5 million people turned out for the festivities, and the streets were lined with revelers as far as the eye could see. It was so crowded that stores were forced to close, and the entire parade route was essentially shut down because too many people wanted the opportunity to see their teams pass by. It remains one of the largest human gatherings in history, and by far the largest in honor of a sports team. Number 4. Mount Everest. At an elevation of 29,029 feet, Mount Everest holds the record as the highest peak on Earth, and as a result, it's the one that every mountaineer wants to conquer. At this altitude, the air is far thinner than at ground level, so much so that water boils at 154 degrees Fahrenheit, and it becomes much more difficult to breathe. This has historically meant that only the fittest and healthiest people have even been able to attempt an ascent to the summit, and it was only in 1953 that the first officially successful climb to the top took place. In recent years, though, with the advent of new technologies to make it safer and experienced climbers who are able to take novices to the top, the number of people attempting to climb during the peak season is constantly increasing. This has led to a strange situation where, at the top of the world and with treacherous crevices and peaks all around, climbers often find themselves in a queue behind other teams for a number of hours before they're able to reach their target. Footage from 2019 showed just how crowded the peak of Everest has become, and at times there were more than 100 people stood on a precarious path, waiting for their turn. Some reported having to walk past the frozen bodies of those who had died in the queue, or from previous seasons that hadn't been removed yet, and these stories were met with condemnation from around the world. It's undoubtedly the most dangerous, crowded place on the planet, where death can just be a few feet away from you. And while you might expect authorities to take this problem seriously and take steps to prevent it from happening again, it's more than likely that scenes like these will continue for many more years because the local governments can raise significant sums by selling permits to make the ascent for around $15,000 per person. Number 3. Rod Stewart in Rio. After beginning his musical career in the late 1960s, Rod Stewart has gone on to sell more than 250 million records worldwide, which makes him one of the most successful artists ever. He's known for traversing different genres with his own recognizable style, and to this day, at the age of 75, he continues to headline sold-out venues and festivals across the globe. It was in 1994 that he would set a world record, though, when he performed at a free concert from New Year's Eve on Copacabana Beach in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. This would become, and still is, the largest free rock concert to ever take place, with somewhere between 3.5 and 4.2 million people packing onto the beach, and was so crowded there was virtually no room for anyone to move. The night ended with a huge fireworks display over the ocean, and while it's thought that a large number of the attendees only showed up so they could see the display, they soon got into the party spirit as Stewart sang a medley of his greatest hits and danced the night away. Number 2. Shinjuku Station, Tokyo. If you've ever tried to walk through New York's Grand Central Station during rush hour, you'll be more than familiar with just how busy it can get. Most large cities from Mexico City to London to Singapore and New Delhi have their equivalent, but by far the busiest station in the world is Shinjuku Station in Tokyo. It's in the Shinjuku and Shibuya wards of the city and connects intercity rail, commuter rail, and subways in the same building. The main station has 35 platforms, but with underground passageways that lead to other stations for a further 17 platforms, it's almost inevitable that you'll go through it as you're traveling around the city. Between the above-ground and underground hallways, there are more than 200 different exits into the surrounding area, and it's such an important transport link that at least 3.6 million people pass through it every day. As you'd expect from a station like this, it's not just trains that people go there for. It's also a bus station and 8 shopping malls built into the station structure itself, as well as a number of further underground stores and attractions. Shinjuku Station is therefore a destination in its own right, which goes some way to explaining why it's such a crowded place to be. Number 1. Kumbh Mela Pilgrimage, India. In the Hindu religion, there's a major festival and pilgrimage that happens on a 12-year cycle across 4 main sites across India. And it's so integral to the beliefs of the people that every time it's held, it breaks the record for the largest single gathering of people in the history of the world, and is the only time that enough people are so tightly packed into one place that it can be seen from space. Known as the Kumbh Mela, the festival has its roots in the 8th century, but the first records of it taking place were in the 1800s. Large-scale gatherings happen every 6 or 12 years, where pilgrims take part in a number of rituals, one of which is being dipped into a sacred river. The festival takes place over several days, with the day of Amavasya being the highlight, and the actual dates at which it is held are determined by the relative positions of the Sun, the Moon, and the planet Jupiter. The last 2 festivals were held in February of 2013, when an astonishing 30 million people are believed to have taken part. But this was beaten on February 4th in 2019, when the Kumbh Mela officials announced the attendance of 50 million pilgrims, all of whom congregate in areas that don't see anywhere near that sort of footfall, and, when the festival takes place, becomes the most crowded place the Earth has ever seen. Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.